Well, at last look, I suppose we have lost somewhere in the neighborhood of 80% of our prairie native grassland here in Alberta. But there is some positive news on the horizon, and thanks to the efforts of the Alberta Conservation Association and other conservation groups, we may be turning the corner. And it's a real pleasure to welcome Brad Downey of the ACA to talk about our native prairie grassland and the work the ACA has been doing in replanting. And I guess we'll start there, Brad. It's pretty impressive when you start to look at the number of acres. When I first reached out to you, I think it was somewhere around 2014, and you had just sort of gotten underway with this project. Where are you at now in terms of reseeding southern Alberta?
We've been fairly successful so far. We have about 2,000 acres now that we've worked with producers on about 4 properties, putting back marginal cropland. So cropland that was, might get a good crop every 3 to 4 years. We're working with them to put them back into native grass. So we have about 2,000 acres and potentially another 500 acres on the books for the upcoming years.
So let's take a step back and talk a little bit about the importance of maintaining a healthy prairie native grassland.
Yeah, native grasslands are crucially important for all wildlife species, both non-game and game species. That's where a lot of our recreational activities take place, on those native grasslands and coulee systems. And for species at risk, even more vital. A lot of our grassland species are linked to obviously the native grasslands, and they are in dire need. And it's just how important native grasslands are to maintain and keep intact. Once they're lost, then it takes a lot of time, a lot of resources, a lot of funding to try to get them back up to snuff. And so it just shows how important these habitats are for everyone, whether you're a rancher or you're the wildlife that use it for habitat.
So you mentioned off the top that you're working with landowners. So what has that relationship been like?
Really good. When we first started, it took a little bit while to get going. When you start working with species at risk and talking to landholders, there's a little bit of trepidation there at the start. But we've been around for 20 years, this project. It's been a pleasure working with all these landholders that we work with. We work with about 90 different ranching operations right now, and close to like those families and those operations manage close to 1 million acres of land now that we are collaborating with them on, to not only benefit their operation but also benefit the wildlife that use those operations too. And just learning and listening and getting that local knowledge from those operations is crucial, right? That's really key for what we do and for conservation in its entirety.
Now, you just threw out a really big number there, 1 million acres. If that were to be turned around and you were successful in being able to reseed various prairie grasses, would that have a dent in terms? I threw out that number, 80% loss. Would there be a substantial, or at least a measurable positive on that?
For what we've restored so far, 2,000.
Exactly. Yeah.
Unfortunately, I think it'd be nice to say it's a positive thing, but I think we might be cost neutral or still losing. There's still more being lost than what we can restore, right? And that's the whole purpose of trying to really promote grasslands and the value of them. And again, carbon sequestration and other important assets that grasslands provide, and really promote the value of trying to keep those grasslands in place, and not only for the habitat, for all those other benefits. And it's an uphill battle, but I'm hoping that over the next 5 years, 10 years, that can kind of finally come into place, and people can really see, what, I think it's more valuable for me to keep my grassland than turn it over into crop. It's an uphill battle, but I'm hoping we can get there.
You mentioned that 500 acres is sort of on the books for the upcoming year. Talk about what does it take in terms of a season, in terms of just people power on the land to plant all this, Brad?
Yeah, it takes a while. Like for even that 500 acres, we'll probably be looking at doing maybe a quarter a year, over the next 3 years. It takes a lot of planning. We often start even all the way at this time in the winter, and we go and harvest silver sagebrush seed. So we go and hand harvest that, so it's locally harvested for the seed. We do planning for the seed that we want to put in it, whether it's the wheat grasses, needle and thread, June grasses, and then we go out and start designing where we want to place all this seed. And it's fun. It's probably one of the funnest parts of my job is to go out and have like a blank landscape, and then being able to kind of plan or design, like, where would I see the sagebrush, where would you see these swells of needle and thread, and trying to create that mosaic of habitat out there for the wildlife, and then also the grazing for cattle. And so that's the whole start of it. And then you go into, there's the spraying, because we have to make sure there's no invasive species ahead of time, seeding, maintenance, all that stuff. So it's a lot of manpower. It takes a number of years to get it back to, well, to try to get it back to what it was. And that's another reason why to try to keep it as native grassland to start with.
Yeah, just talk a little bit. I mean, I guess in my mind, you're replanting a native species, but as you have just indicated, there's a lot of prep that needs to go into all of that. So is it, plant it and forget it, or do you have to work the land a little bit in order to be successful with what you've planted, even though it is a native species?
It's basically, we need to work the land at the start to ensure that it's a clean bed to put the seed in, right? So often we have it farmed for a year or so, often wheat, and then we'll actually seed the native seed, broadcast it in right into the stubble. And then it is literally leave it and let nature take its course, right? We'll have to go in and potentially spray out Canada thistle, and if there's any other kochia coming up, stuff like that. So it often includes a spray in the second year, but usually it's just letting Mother Nature take its course and letting those seeds, if they're adapted for that climate and that ecoregion, then let them, do their thing and grow. So that's it seems simple, but there's just a lot of prep ahead of time. Often, the first year you'll have a lot of volunteer wheat come up sometimes, which is handy as well. There's restoration sites we've been into that you'll see almost 140 sharp-tailed grouse using that in the winter. So, there's other benefits that volunteer wheat provides as well.
In terms of partners, Brad, are there some that you would like to call out and express an appreciation for the work that they're bringing to the table?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, none of this is possible without Environment and Climate Change Canada, our federal partnership, our federal funding. Those guys have provided funding for this type of projects since the beginning for the last 20 years or more now. And none of this could be possible without that funding. Our partners also, Prairie Conservation Forum, Alberta Environment and Protected Areas, as well as Cows and Fish, have all collaborated with us on this stuff. And then also importantly is our advisory groups with Alberta beef producers, Canadian Cattlemen's Association, and the Canadian Roundtable for Sustainable Beef, all the cattle industry.
All right. Well, listen, we'll leave it there. Congratulations on what, as you say, maybe we're just treading water at this point, and in today's environment, maybe that's not such a bad thing, Brad.
No, maybe not.
Okay. Thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you.